All right. Good evening, everyone. It is November 27th, 2012. It is a business meeting tonight for the North Kingstown School Committee. If everyone could rise, and we will say the pledge to the flag. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Welch.
Might I have a moment, please?
Yes, you may have a moment.
Since this is my last official meeting with the school committee, and since I have in the past taken the opportunity when one of our members needs to be recognized, and I don't want to do it for one and not for another, I wish you'd all join me in singing happy birthday to Larry Cerisi, who turned 29 a week ago Monday.
Yet again.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Larry. Happy birthday to you.
I don't know if my face can get any redder than it is now, but thank you.
I backed away from the mic so we did not have to pick up my singing on mic.
Not the first time Dick has sung Happy Birthday at the meeting.
That's true, it isn't. Before Lorraine calls the roll, I would like to introduce our two new student members who are here to join us tonight. We have Dana Larkin in the green, and we have Chelsea Campbell in the white. So they're both here for their first meeting. And basically, then they'll be trading off one after another for the meetings after that. So make sure you introduce yourself to them at some time if you haven't already done that. And I've already talked a little bit about what they don't have to do here at the meetings. But we appreciate them coming. So, Lorraine, go ahead and call the roll.
Linda Avanzato. Here. Melvoyd Benson. John Bascardin.
Here.
Larry Cerisi.
Here.
William Mudge. Kimberly Page.
Here.
Richard Welsh.
Here.
Julia Held. Here. Student representatives.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, Lorraine, could you go through calendars, please?
December 3rd, 7 p.m., swearing in of the new town council and school committee members and recognition of outgoing members will be at the Beechwood Senior Center. Immediately following that, on December 3rd, will be the biennial organizational meeting here at North Kingstown High School. We'll be moving over here following that. December 6th, policy subcommittee meeting, 9 a.m., Central Administration Building. December 11th, school committee work session, 7 p.m. December 17th, joint budget meeting with the town council, 7 p.m. tentatively, Beechwood Senior Center. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just as a reminder to the committee, on December 3rd, after we do our chair, vice chair vote, we will be making sure that we pick our committee assignments. So Lorraine and I have already drawn up a list of the committee assignments, and we'll try to put some sort of a small blurb about what the committee does. But if any of you are on a particular committee right now that you think that you would be better writing a blurb, which probably you would, feel free to submit that to Lorraine so that we have that. Because I certainly don't know what all of the committee assignments, I know the ones I do, but that's not, you all have different ones. All right, recognitions, presentations.
I guess I'd just like to recognize the 52 All-State musicians from North Kingstown High School who made All-State this year, and 6 of those were #1 musicians in the state of Rhode Island. So that's, once again, a tremendous accomplishment for our music department.
Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if we had anything else on the recognitions and presentations. If we don't, I would ask if we could, we have Mr. Grundy here this evening, the chairman from our Facilities Management Subcommittee, and I believe he's here to speak on one of our agenda items. I would ask if we could move that forward on the agenda and not keep him here any later than he needs to be, if,
I second that.
I don't care. You don't need
Yes,
to vote.
that is fine. I think that that would be fine. So we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Then, let's jump right to the unfinished business, number 4B, the CIP existing bond, future bond. And Dr. Roget and Mary King, I'll let you guys take that over.
I'm going to let Mrs. King make the initial comments, and we're going to hear from Mr. Grundy as well.
I sent you information regarding the proposed CIP program request that we would send to the Town Council Asset Management Committee. And I have worked on this with Phil Bergeron from the town, and Mr. Grundy, who, as noted, is the chair of our facilities subcommittee. And this document didn't get presented to the committee for their approval. Unfortunately, I ran out of time. But I did work with Mr. Grundy on it, and basically, the changes in this year, a lot is the same, because what we've done is we have some more estimates, some little bit cleaner estimates of the bond work, and that's the majority of the CIP document, which is the $6.4 million bond, so whatever's remaining after the DMS roof project, as well as funding from the $9 million 2007 bond, so that's included here as well. And then there are some things in here that are non-bond related. So anything that are on these documents that's noted as other funding are things that we need to start looking at for the school department. And this document are capital upgrades and capital improvements. So what that means is that these funds are not for regular routine operating maintenance. They're for things that are very difficult, if not impossible, for us to cover in our routine operating budget. So a lot of those things are noted as district-wide things or some other initiatives that we're proposing. And the final outcome of this is that we would like to submit this to the Asset Management Committee with a request of $800,000 from the town of North Kingstown for our CIP fund. In looking back, I see that the last time that the school CIP fund was funded was just over $200,000 in the FY 2010 school year. So there hasn't been anything that I saw, please correct me if you have different information, from that time. And it's very important that we know that we have some CIP money, because these buildings do need capital improvements and repairs outside of our bond funding. We don't go for a bond every single year. So again, these are things that are not part of your day-to-day operating maintenance budget. And Mr. Grundy is here, too, because I have worked with him. If you have any questions for him, because clearly he's been around the district longer than I have, but if you have any questions for him, he can certainly address any issues.
All right. So are there questions that people would like to ask about what we have in front of us? Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a question. I just, before we move into questions, I just kind of wanted to make a quick comment and expand a little bit on what Mrs. King had mentioned, just so we're clear as far as past funding and future funding of capital improvement projects. The policy or that the council, town council has followed in previous budget years was to infuse the school department's capital improvement budget $500,000 annually to carry out the capital improvement projects that Mrs. King outlined. And this has been a separate budgetary line item and infusion separate from the general operating fund, the annual operating fund. Aside from that $200,000 that she noted we received, there hasn't been any funding added to the capital improvement budget. So if you look at the, I'm not sure if they call it a policy or resolution that they passed over 10 years ago to infuse the school department's capital improvement plan with $500,000 a year. So if you look at over the last 4 years, it should have been roughly $2 million infused into the school department's capital improvement plan budget. There was roughly $200,000 just in that four-year period of time. So you're looking at underfunding of approximately $1.8 million to the school department's capital improvement budget. Now, certainly in these difficult budgetary times and difficult economic times, you can certainly understand, may be able to understand, why that additional funding has not been infused into the capital improvement budget. But something we need to recognize here, and we need to have an open and honest conversation going forward when we discuss funding for these capital improvement projects. And what I mean by that is just strictly focusing on the numbers and the math and not the politics of the matter. Mathematically, you're looking at, like I said, a $1.8 million shortfall in the funding that we are scheduled to receive in the last 4 years from the council. And again, that's the council's resolution that they passed over 10 years ago. During that same time, we have amassed a town rainy day fund of roughly $9.5 million. So at one side of the ledger, we have a rainy day fund of $9.5 million, and on the other side of the ledger, we have no money in the capital improvement plan, and it's not been funded or been underfunded by $1.8 million during that time period. Now, again, you could argue it's difficult budgetary times, difficult economic times, and the money's not there to place into that capital improvement plan as has been done in previous years. But again, when you amass a $9.5 million surplus and you underfund the other side of the ledger, $1.8 million, I think that's that argument really doesn't hold water. So, when you say to ask the council for $800,000, basically you're asking them for $1 million less than they were originally supposed to infuse into that capital improvement plan. So, and I think it's important to note the domino effect that takes place here. And I know I'm a little bit off topic and getting a little bit ahead of things, and I apologize for that, and I apologize for being long-winded on this. But again, I think the historical numbers here are important to understand before we move forward with these capital improvement plans and these requests for funding, so everyone knows the history and the math that's involved here. I'm going to wrap up. You're looking at the general budget every year, as you said, does not cover capital improvement projects, things like boilers, things like roofs, so on and so forth. That money comes out of the capital improvement budget. If you don't have money if you don't take the revenue from your general budget, and you don't have money in your capital improvement plan, these things need to be fixed, whether it's a boiler, whether it's a hot water tank, whether it's a roof. It leaves you with no other choice besides to go out and for bond. And that's very unpopular. So you need to understand that these are projects that need to get done. This is money that needs to come from somewhere. It's not going to come from the general operating budget. The money's not being infused into the capital improvement plan. And certainly nobody wants to continue to go out for bonds and burden the taxpayers even further every year with additional debt. But nonetheless, understand, you have $9.5 million in surplus rainy day fund, and you have another side of the ledger that's been underfunded by $1.8 million according to the council's own resolution in the past 4 years. So thank you for the extra time, and I apologize for getting off topic and maybe getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I think the history of that is important to understand before we kind of go into saying, here's what we need to do and here's how we're going to fund it.
I think it's also important to note that the needs of the district were determined to be in excess of $20 million, at which time we went out for the $6.4 million bond. So while that bond money is terrific and it's going to really help the district, there were a lot of other needs. And as we continue, like Mr. Cerisi said, it is a domino effect, because as those items are not addressed, more items keep coming because buildings don't get any younger. And I can tell you that I came from a district that ignored their buildings for years and years and years, and they're at a point of no return on a couple of their buildings. There's only so much duct tape you can put on things. So that I think it's important to note that, too, that there were excess needs outside of bond funding as well.
Mrs. King, are you looking for a motion tonight to approve the bond, or?
To approve this capital, it's called a CIP request, and to allow us to ask for the Asset Management Committee to consider recommending to the Town Council a request for $800,000.
Right, that's what I wanted to make sure. I understood exactly what you're asking.
So I would forward this package to Michael Embry tomorrow morning, should this be approved tonight.
Mr. Busgarden.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at the document from Edward Rose Architects, where it outlines the scope of work for the different buildings in the district, attachment A. I'm just curious, and I apologize for not talking about this offline before the meeting. This attachment just slipped by me. I'm looking at Davisville Middle, number 3, remove and replace consumer science classroom millwork. And there's a couple others that are, I wonder how they fall under the health and safety umbrella. Replacing signage, I'm not so sure. I don't see how that is. And, please explain it to me, because I just don't see it, how it's a health and safety issue.
Well, that could be an ADA issue, so that's where it would fall under health and safety.
Millwork, replacing millwork is an ADA?
I don't know about the millwork, but the signage could definitely be. Mr. Grundy, do you have any idea on the millwork?
I don't believe the millwork was on a part of the 3 items that were specifically related to the CIP request. I believe
That's part of the bond.
that's
Yeah,
part
it was
of the
included in the
not-
bond thing.
Right, it's part of the bond, not this CIP. A lot of those could have been identified either because if you have loose molding, it's a hazard. If it intrudes into a space and it creates a space narrower than ADA requirements, some of it has to be removed. Some of the schools have lead paint issues, so it could be less expensive to remove it in its entirety than to do a remediation and leave it in place.
Well, I'm in the trade, so I understand a little bit about lead remediation, mold remediation, and that'd be open for debate if it's cheaper to replace as opposed to just covering it with latex paint. Once it's covered latex paint, it's considered sealed.
Mr. Biscardin, one thing that I can say is that I include the Edward Rouse Architects estimates in there, and that doesn't mean that those are the specific projects that we move forward with, because that is in early stages before it goes out to RFP, and all of that would come back to the facilities subcommittee, and then the school committee, again, to approve moving forward with that. And we would need to do that relatively quickly, because I think they're looking to go out to bid in RFP February or March. But these are the estimates on what they have seen of the over $20 million of things that need to be done, and these were some of the priority things they picked out of those schools under this bond when they did their walkthrough. So you're not necessarily saying that those are the things you're going to go forward with, because the further questions could be, well, why are we doing that when we need to do something at a different school that's under this bond?
And that was lead me to my next question. You said this all is going to go into a package to Mike Embry. When you say this, do you mean include this document from Edward Rose Architects? If it is included, I'm wondering how that is going to be interpreted by them, considering the way I interpreted it.
Well, I wouldn't send that to them, but they already have it, because Phil Bergeron is the one who's working with the architect as well as our facilities manager. So they already know what the proposals are and the reasons for making those proposals. But again, nothing says that, because we actually have something else that Dr. Auger wants us to look at instead on one of the schools, and we're going to take a look at that. So there's still opportunity for there to be changes and move around, because no matter what you do, there's still only X amount of dollars left and X amount of dollars that can be spent. So if there are other issues at other schools that Dr. Ajay or the facility subcommittee thinks should be addressed first, not other schools, only other schools that are on this bond, let me be clear on that, there's certainly still time to do that. But I do know that Phil Bergeron, our facilities supervisor, and Mr. Partridge have done extensive walkthroughs of these schools that are on the bond.
I guess maybe then I just would like to, at some point, get a little better clarification on, why something like that needs to be replaced, and how it, and more importantly, how it falls under the health and safety. And again, I apologize for not talking about this in depth with anyone beforehand, but I'll let it go because I have way more questions than I probably should bring it up right here. So thank you.
And we can definitely do that because we're going to need to bring Mr. Partridge to a facility subcommittee meeting very soon, I would say, in the next couple of weeks to start talking about this stuff, so we know what direction the facility subcommittee is going to recommend the school committee to go in as well on these particular projects. So there is still time for that. This is not, it's carved in stone. I included that information just so that you would have some sort of idea where those bond numbers came from and what the early numbers are looking like for the estimates.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Welch and then Mrs. Avanzato.
I'll yield to Mrs. Avanzato. I think she was ahead of me.
Mrs. Avanzato.
Just a quick note, sort of along the lines of what John just said. When I first started working with CIP issues, I became aware that these things are a moving target, which at first didn't really realize that, but we need to continue to reprioritize. The facilities subcommittee has done a phenomenal job of taking a vast amount of work that needs to be done and a vast amount of information and boiling it down for us. And I know that that's an area John has an interest in, building and contracting, and he may be involved in the facilities subcommittee in the future. Some of that detail work, I have attended 3 or 4 of those meetings, takes place in those meetings, and where you discuss each punch list item, because there's like some 40 items under some of the schools and 25 under others. So maybe some more discussion will happen down the road with those kinds of issues so that we can determine. I see most of them are pretty self-explanatory. They say 88 right next to them. A lot of them maybe are removal of mold and carpeting due to mold or asbestos. Those kinds of things are pretty self-evident. But so we'll be drilling down to the detail more in those meetings, is what I was going to say for John. Thank you. Go ahead, Dick.
Thank you. Just to answer some of your questions, John, because Mrs. King was not here when SMMA was hired to put together the Phase 2, which is required by RIDE. We were under a time constraint and running out of time in order to get the Phase 2 done within a 12-month period of when the Phase 1 was done. And we really had to force the issue, okay? And everything is to meet the requirements that RIDE places on getting all of this information in. It has to be done by an architect with engineers and so forth. That being said, okay, all of the stuff, once it's about to be done, my feeling is the Facilities Committee will relook at the information and address it individually and make sure, A, that they agree, B, that they agree with the methodology that maybe the architect and or engineer chose. They may have a better idea, all right? The great thing about the people on the Facilities Committee, and I'm going to throw some credit to Jim and the other folks, they have the technical background and wherewithal to have worked with many architects in many situations to be able to draw from that experience and say, I've seen it done a better way, a more effective way. It may even be more expensive, but in the long run, it would be less expensive because of operating costs, et cetera. So to answer you, John, and I hope I have, I would hope that you would become involved in facilities and work with them, because then you'll see how good they really are, okay? And because of your background in construction, then you'll be a good vehicle for this committee going forward to explain what I'm trying to explain. And both you and Mrs. King, being the recent members in this group, you wouldn't have this knowledge. So your questions are well-founded, And Jim, I think you probably, hopefully agree with what I just said?
No, I do.
No, you do. Yes, I do.
Yes, I do. When we went through the process with SMMA, I believe when we got towards the end of it, we were meeting every single night, and I believe the last papers were signed at close to 10 o'clock at night when they had to be stamped before midnight. So it was a tough process for us to get that through, and had we missed those deadlines, our current bond wouldn't be subject to a ride reimbursement. So that was a very important landmark for us to make. The depth of each individual item, to go back from memory to go through every single one, is difficult. But some of the ones that stand out and some of the things that are in the CIP that are important, the things that have been kicked down the road for several years. And one of the easiest ones to identify is the suggestion that we look to go from a put-and-take or pump-out system for the septics at the high school, as far as the kitchens and janitorial areas, and go to a leach field. And that's something that Mrs. King has $40,000 plugged in. We've actually worked with her and solicited other bids outside of the initial estimates. And it's one of those items that has a 2 to 3 year payback. So had the CIP been funded 4 years ago and this project been implemented, we would have already recouped 100% of the money that we spent on it. And not to go back and rehash what's already been said, but most of these items, as they've been identified, are items that have future savings, that we can start to have some institutional savings where we can recoup money every year going forward. Things like putting air conditioning in computer rooms to get more life out of the computers. Other things are OSHA related. When you look at the lighting and parking lot improvements at the high school, some areas where we have staff don't meet basic OSHA requirements for required lumens for an employee to go back and forth. I think we've gone from the original budget estimates we had were close to $46 million worth of repairs, and that was pared down to $20 million or $20-some million worth of repairs, and we went for a $6.4 million bond. While we didn't have a full subcommittee meeting, we did, while being very careful of open meeting laws, we did circulate this amongst members. We did look for input. Most of the input we got was that perhaps Ms. King cut too much, and we should be asking for more. But the financial realities are that the money just isn't available. So I don't think that there's any fluff. We've long gone past fluff. And the majority of these things, even a different means of heating and cooling the administration building is one of those things that finding a more efficient means will have an annual savings every year, and one of the things we look at is what's the payback? Is it a realistic payback in light of the economic times? If things have 30-year paybacks, like we looked at windows in some buildings, the economic times may not warrant something with a 30 or 40-year payback, but as little low-hanging fruit is left, we're looking to grab that, things that have 2, 3, 4, and 5-year paybacks. And I think that's one of the things that this CIP plan tries to address, is the things that will provide some immediate relief in the ongoing operation costs of the school.
Well, I didn't mean my question to sound like I was criticizing the veracity of the report. I'm just truly wondering how science classroom millwork fit in health and safety. That's all. There was no underlying, not saying there was fluff that was squeaked in there. I'm just curious as how that, and there was a couple other ones, but I'll wait until maybe we can talk, or it comes back to the table.
What we found is that every time a proposal's been brought to us, whether it was a roofing proposal or something as simple as some hot water heaters, we've tried to look at the most effective, cost-effective way, both from a construction and from an ongoing operations standpoint. And the beauty of what we have is we have a group of people that have been in the construction trades for a cumulative over 300 years on that committee, who've all agreed that they wouldn't be bidding or looking for anything from these projects. So they're simply looking for what's in the best interest of the town and of the school department, and I think that the CIP budget does reflect that. I agree with Mr. Cerisi's comment that had these things been properly funded years ago, you'd already have the savings. Things like the septic would have paid itself off, and we'd be saving $20,000 this year, and we would have already recouped 100% of what the construction costs would have been. And we just strongly support what's in the CIP. We think that it's not just reasonable in terms of what's needed, but it's reasonable in terms of the economic conditions. If we were in a better economy, we'd probably be recommending a substantially higher number for CIP. There's a lot more projects that have both savings and important needs for the district that just because of the financial situation of the town, we don't want to see these things die because we're asking for too much.
I know, Mr. Roget, I see your hand, Mr. Welch. Dr. Roget, okay. Go ahead, Mr. Welch.
I just wanted to add one more quick thing. The budget year 2001 was the last year on record that I think the budget shows that we received a $500,000 payment towards CIP. Since then, in the last 10 or 11 years, the total that the school department has received in CIP payments for the 10 buildings that we have to take care of is $527,000 total. So there's a reason why we're where we are, and why this has to be done. And I know I'm going to hear about it when you folks come for budget.
Right, we can tell you now.
Mrs. Evans,
Just very briefly want to agree with a lot of already what's been said, especially what Larry said about the CIP. We are in sort of a dire situation, and I think, were you in East Providence, Mary? Is that where you were? I did a lot of reading about that situation and that with the schools in East Providence, with the asbestos and how bad it got with the abraded asbestos in the air, and they almost had to shut, I think they did shut the school down. They had major, and probably still do have major problems. We can't afford to ignore the problems in our buildings to the point where they're unsafe. We have people criticizing us for the bond, for going out for bond at all, but we really had no other alternative. And I, for one, I greatly appreciate the work of the facility subcommittee. It's an amazing amount of work that's gone into this, and I really hope that John gets involved, because we're going to need, since Dick is going over to the town council, we're really going to need our liaison, someone that's on our committee. I found that to be very helpful, and I think it'll be very helpful if John does that, fulfills that role for us. So,
what I'm struck by in the conversation, is the point that when we initially were looking at the needs of the district, this is years ago, and people identified over $40 million worth of needs. That got whittled down to one point to around $20 million of things that we absolutely need to do, and started down the road for a bond in that, sequence. And then found out that because of the economy, because of what RIDE was approving, we whittled that down to $6.4 million worth of absolutely, we must do this for health and safety and ADA compliance kinds of reasons. So, I don't think anybody can accuse us of trying to do some kind of a cash grab. And when you look at the fact that the CIP has not been funded, or only funded about $500,000 in the last 10 or 11 years, it speaks to the needs that we have. And something that Mr. Grundy brought up, about it's not just about maintenance, it's about preventative maintenance. And that I think the people here from the trades tonight would be the first to say that when you take care of these issues well, you save money in the long run. It's not a matter of spending money. You save the money that you're going to have to spend on an emergency basis with another bond a few years down the line, because there's another roof that's leaking very badly, or there's something that's very unsafe all of a sudden. If you can take care of that for a relatively low cost in a proactive way, obviously that's the best way we want to work. So when you think about $40 million down to 20, down to $6.4 million, and at this point we're looking in a one-year total of $800,000, doesn't seem like very much. when you think about it. And I think it speaks to the responsible approach that we're taking and recognizing that, it is tough budgetary times and that we're trying to do the best we can with whatever money is going to be available to us. So.
Mr. Grundy, could you briefly describe, and I kind of know the process that your committee went through, but I guess for the sake of, for being here at the public meeting, if you could briefly describe how you put the things on the list that your committee decided.
Well, everything that was originally presented to us was based on the SMMA report. That was the original basis that we had to work with. They went out and did the individual school inspections, identified the issues, cited the code sections that we needed to address. From there, it went for the RIDE review. Department of Ed reviewed the SMMA application to determine if it was in compliance and met all of their requirements. When we received it back from RIDE, we went through it again to try and prioritize beyond the level of prioritization that SMMA did. SMMA identified things more in categories, whether it was an ADA, whether it was a health safety, whether it was a building maintenance, imminent failure type issue. Where we've put most of our emphasis is on trying to identify problems and solutions that will provide long-term structural savings to the district. If a roof needs repair before we damage insulation, before we damage underlaying decking, before we cause mold issues inside the building, we move that up to our top of our priority list. Some of the other issues that we've looked at have been the excessive high temperatures and trying to find a less expensive way than air conditioning, say, the upper floor of the high school. And we've spent quite a bit of time both on the upper floor, in the attics, looking at the individual unit heaters, reviewing some of the original construction plans. And one of the things that we've worked through is trying to use some of the existing components with some newer technology in a way to solve the problems, as opposed to the more conventional, more expensive ways of adding a chiller and adding piping and going with a full-blown air conditioning system. The septic systems were another example of trying to address an ongoing cost we have every year with a way to save the district money every year. I'm trying to see some of the other things we have on here. The parking area and lighting, those fall under some of the OSHA requirements. Upgrading the holding tanks, replacement of water heating systems at the high school and at the annex. One of the things that we as a committee did is we've been looking at individual vendor reports. With those vendor reports, we've actually gone out, taken components apart. We've requested and had factory people come out and look at different components, and we've tried to find more cost-effective ways to manage our systems. We've identified some issues such as the boilers at the high school have no sequencing, meaning that since you have 12 of these in a row, the first one always comes on first. Then if the need is there, the second one comes on. So we have a very unbalanced amount of hours on each of these. So one of the things we did is we've looked into a sequencing to get more life out of the whole system. So that's been kind of the process of what we've taken. Another example might be the Davisville Middle. We were addressing the flooring issue with the mold. We contacted and had a manufacturer come out with a relatively new product that meets, we believe it meets, and we're waiting for some final written decision from Department of Health, but we believe it meets the asbestos encapsulation requirements for the flooring, and we got them to give us a test area at no cost to the district. so that we wouldn't be recommending to put something in that's a relatively new technology without having a year of seeing how it works, both from an operational and from a maintenance standpoint. We've worked with the maintenance department to establish a more efficient hot water system also at the middle school, where we were at one point maintaining, I believe it was 1,500 or 1,800 gallons of hot water simply for hand washing in the bathrooms. And that was being maintained 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So we took a design that was out to bid. The school department rebid it with a new design. I believe the bids came in about $25,000 less. And now we have instantaneous units, so we're not having that energy cost of maintaining 1,500 gallons of hot water all year. So we've looked for things that we could do to lower the operational costs as well.
All right, I appreciate that. I appreciate the thoroughness that you all have gone through, too. That gives me a lot to think about. I have one other thing I wanted to comment on, but first, Mrs. King has put this out there, and basically what I neglected to do at the very beginning is I should be looking for a motion and a second, and then we were to have our discussion, so.
I'll so moved.
I'll second that.
Okay. Mrs. Avanzato.
I just, we talk a lot about getting members of the community involved and working with the school committee and just helping the town in general with, and this is an amazing group that we have here. I mean, I don't think the town has the equivalent. I mean, I know they have asset management, but the amount of time you guys have put in is just amazing. And we've already saved a lot of money with the things that you guys have done. It's all volunteer. I mean, you all work many, many, many hours, so it's much appreciated. Just want to reiterate that. When is your next meeting?
We don't have one set up yet. We were waiting for the new appointees, because we tried to get one together for November.
Okay.
It just didn't
wondered
work out.
So we could figure
Right.
that out. Okay.
Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Grundy, for presenting that thorough information. And I thank you to my colleagues for reiterating and recognizing the financial history, funding history of the CIP. And I just wanted to clarify, again, what I stated at the onset, my purpose or my intent in discussing the funding of the CIP and the history of the CIP. I just want to stick to the conversation of the projects that need to be done, the priorities of the projects, and how we go about funding those projects, and understanding how they've been funded in the past and why there may be or may not be a lack of funds. The conversation, and I'm not going to allow the conversation to delve into, as we've seen in the past when we talk about these types of financial issues, to delve into politics. I really want to make sure that this committee, we stick to the topic of the facts, the projects, and the dollars and cents. That's what it's all about. And I just don't want my comments to be misrepresented or misinterpreted as a slight or a shot across the bow with our funding authority, which is basically the town council, because I know certainly they've had their fiscal challenges and on their side of the ledger as well. And they've had fiscal obligations to meet, and in doing so, it becomes quite challenging, and it's definitely it has to boil down to what people want and what they actually need. So I look forward to having this CIP, the projects and the funding of the projects. I look forward to having this discussion in further depth and further detail when we, go through the budgetary process with our colleagues on the town council. And just making sure that we're clear on the projects that need to be done and the funding sources and what resources may or may not be available. And just hoping that we can forge a relationship going forward and work on these things together and purely focus on the projects and the dollars and cents that these projects will require. So, thank you. I just needed to take a moment to clarify that. So. Thank you.
Well, and actually, that was something that I wanted to talk about, is that I think that all of us cannot be very happy about the lack of funding that we've had in the past, but I really want to move forward. And so one of the things that I was very impressed with was Mr. Grundy's explanation as to how you came up with these ideas, because from what I heard is that all of the things on here are basically designed to, one, fix a problem or an issue, but two, do it such that it will not be a long-term maintenance issue, that this is something that it's getting ahead of, getting in front of the issues. And I think, if anything, that carries a lot of weight in that we're looking at things that we would like to fix before they become bigger problems, and we'd like to fix them in the best budgetary way so that we're not looking at them becoming larger issues. And, you know, it is the sort of thing of we need to move forward in our discussion with how we want to make sure that we finance issues as a town. And so, you know, I would hope that when we do present this, that we look at what can be saved in working ahead rather than reflecting on what we haven't had in the past. That would be, you know, where I would want to expend my energy. And I do appreciate all the time that you and the committee has taken and Mr. Welch has taken with the committee, because I know that you've put in a tremendous amount of time. I know that you've come in on days and evenings when you didn't have to. And so I feel very good about this report in that it's very thorough in detailing what you have in there. So I will be voting for this when we take our vote in a few minutes. So, Mr. Cerisi.
Just one quick disclaimer to what I said. You know, Mr. Welch is going to be a member of the town council in a couple of weeks, so I just want to make it clear that I do reserve the right to criticize him. So.
I take back my birthday.
Especially after the birthday.
Mrs. Avanzado.
We're just being so extra careful, but I didn't mean my comments to be meant in any way as any kind of criticism of the Asset Management Committee. I was just complimenting our own committee, the time they spend.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Grundy.
Seeing no further hands, Lorraine, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Linda Avanzado.
Yes.
John Discardin.
Yes.
Larry Cerisi.
Yes.
Kimberly Page.
Yes.
Richard Welsh.
Abstain. Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we are going back to the beginning of our agenda with the superintendent's report. Dr. Auger.
I'm all set.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lorraine, do we have any motions to disclose for executive session?
I do. Do you want to get a motion to seal the minutes first?
Yes, thank you for that reminder. Do I have a motion to seal the minutes?
So move.
Second?
So I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, the minutes for November 27, 2012 have been sealed.
And there was just one vote taken tonight. All members were present at tonight's executive session except Mel Boyd Benson and Bill Mudge. Motion by Larry Cerisi to adjourn executive session and go into open. Seconded by Linda Avanzado. Motion passed 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Berglund. So that brings us to the consent agenda. What items would people like to exempt?
Just a minute.
Mr. Busgarden.
I would like to exempt E1 and E2, please, for discussion.
E1 and E2, okay. Mr. Cerisi.
If there are no, are there any further exemptions? I'll
Mr. Welch.
I just want to make a comment, not an exemption, on D1.
Would you like to make your comment now?
Sure. Just for the public record, so the public knows, we're going to be going forward once this is approved, with approximately a 25% reduction in our unit cost per kilowatt hour in electric over our current contract, which 25% of our electric bill is an enormous amount of money. And this has been something that's been worked out with Mrs. King and Steve Janelle, and also in combination with work that was done with the Rhode Island Association of School Committees, we were able to to get this change made, and quite frankly, if you can save that kind of money in electric usage in a municipality, 25%, that's a win for the taxpayers. So I just wanted to make that public statement. Thank you very much.
All right, so you're not exempting D1 then?
No.
Okay. Mr. Cerisi?
If there are no further exemptions at this time, I'll motion to exempt and to approve the non-exempted consent agenda items.
Second that.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to approve the other items,
Second?
and we have 2 seconds.
Oh, you can already
That's
second
all right.
that? Oh, sorry. Okay,
We can continue to second if people would like. But,
Second.
all right, so Lorraine, can we take a roll call vote, please?
John Biscardin.
Yes.
Larry Cerisi.
Yes?
Kimberly Page.
Yes.
Richard Welsh.
Yes.
Linda Avanzado.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to the first exempted item, E2.
Yeah, E2, and this is, I just wanted to bring it up for discussion, so Dr. O'Shea or Mrs. King could explain this so it's clear to everybody that the idea, the thought process, and the result, so.
This is for the chemistry?
Correct.
Yeah. This situation is one where our current Step 10 teacher is out sick, and all indications are will be done working in the district in January. So we have currently a veteran teacher who is working out tremendously as a long-term sub. And once we realized, the end of the sick leave and all, we advertised for the position, and even after advertising, because this is a chemistry position, it's a difficult position for certifications. The people who have applied have all been at or near top step. I know it is a goal of the committee to, whenever possible, to hire at a lower step, 1 or 2. This is a situation where we would be hiring at a top step, but I certainly feel it is warranted. This person has gotten rave reviews and would make a great addition to the district. I would hate to lose her in either waiting or just not be fair to her in continuing to pay her as a long-term sub when, for all intents and purposes, she is a full-time teacher for us at this point. So the way this would work, because there is another teacher who is at a .8 who's already in the system, that person in the department would go from .8 to 1.0 in her position, which is currently, I think it is Step 3, and then Mrs. Erickson, the teacher coming in, would be hired at .8 FTE, science teacher for North Kingstown High School.
Thank you, Doctor. I know, I remember years ago that my experience with chemistry was pretty much dependent on how good the teacher was, because I wasn't all that bright with it. And I hope that if she's as good as you and Dr. Kenworthy say she is, that she will have an impact on marginal student like me.
We could enroll you in a class.
No.
That would help to make this vote go
through.
through.
I'm happy with all the chemistry I know, thank you. I don't need
Mr. Biscardin, would you like to make a motion for E2?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for E2. All those in favor?
Excuse me, are we
Oh.
done with discussion?
Would you like to have more discussion, Mr.?
Yeah, I just want to
Sorry.
say that in my short time being on this committee, some 4 years, I am very proud, quite frankly, of the hirings that this committee and administration has been involved in, all the way through the staff level and through administration. And this is just an indication of the quality of staff, certified teacher, that our students are being taught by. And it's extremely important when you understand that the biggest failings are math and sciences, and that to have someone that is evidently extremely qualified to be hired. And I know I'm one of the penny pinchers on this group, but this is to the benefit of what we're here for, and that's the education of our students. So congratulations and thank you to the administration.
Any other comments? All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, E3.
Nobody did that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so, yes, E3 passed. So E1.
Yeah, and this, I would just, Mr. King, you and I, we spoke about this, I think it was today. The use of the word stipend was confusing to me, and I would just wonder if, and I realize it's contractual, but just for clarity, that if when these things roll out, maybe sooner or later I'll catch on, but as these things roll out, if we could word that differently, so until I remember that stipend is not the strict definition that I'm used to it being.
No, I agree, and I have spoken to our HR manager, and we're actually going to call that a differential, I guess. And for the benefit of the rest of the committee members, in the ESP union, there is an additional hourly rate, a differential, if you will, for positions that are designated as senior clerks. And this position is designated as a senior payroll clerk, so this differential would apply. So what happens is they come in at whatever step, and in this instance, we are starting at step 1 because they're from the outside, and then this differential is applied on it. It's almost as if you were paying a night rate. So, no, you are very correct, Mr. Biscardin. That was a confusing term, and we're not going to use that going forward.
Thank you. That was just the extent of my discussion on that.
Motion to approve?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, that brings us to, that's the end of our consent agenda. That brings us to unfinished business. And the first item under unfinished business for the 2012-2013 school budget is the approval of a budget transfer for the 9th grade PSI.
This budget item is for supplies to help. I think most of you may recall that in years past, we've made an effort to, we made some adjustments to our science curriculum where students had been going through a process of taking earth science in the 9th grade, biology in the 10th grade, and then physics or chemistry in the 11th grade has been the requirement. And as you know, our state test in science has all 4 of those strands equally represented. So we were not preparing our students adequately for the state assessment. We made a move in the last couple of years to have physical science taught in the 9th grade, and this year it's really kicked in. So now we have far more students who are taking physics or physical science, and therefore there's an increased need for equipment. The Progressive Science Initiative piece, we've made some purchasing around this before for both math and science, where this is the use of smart boards and student response clickers, and it gives teachers the advantage of seeing instantaneously how the kids are doing and do a very good job with formative assessment. And our teachers really like having this tool. They find it to be a very effective tool, and so we want to continue to increase that throughout the science department and in math, and this is just another step in that direction.
Motion to approve?
Second?
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions about this purchase? All right. Hearing not a whole lot of dissent, I'll just ask people, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, our next item is the food services RFP. I have put this on the agenda because this has been a topic for of discussion by a number of school committee members who have asked about this issue, and so who were asking me if we were going to be moving ahead or what we were going to be doing about this. So that was the reason that it was put on the agenda for tonight. I know that Mrs. King has informed me that she has some information about this being on our agenda and how we want to move forward, so I'm actually going to ask her to explain.
When I saw this item, when I knew this was going on the agenda, I had recalled that the state, which currently has a food service vendor, that contract with that vendor, and I believe that vendor is Aramark, will be expiring on June 30th of 2013. So they are actually going out to bid now to update that vendor. I spoke to RIDE representatives, which is the Becky Bissett, who is in the food service area of RIDE, and Cindy Booth, who is in Carolyn Diaz's office on the efficiencies and finance side. And that RFP, if it has not been posted, it will be imminently. She did say that it had gone to the Department of Administration. They expect that the answers and the analysis from that bid RFP will be back in early March, very early March, so that they will have chosen from that information the new state-approved food service vendor. What their RFP does and what a contract with this vendor does is it provides an umbrella contract for districts that choose to become part of this statewide service. So it does not mean that you cannot use that vendor and customize, if there are certain staffing requirements that you wanted, or if there are certain menu requirements that you wanted. This statewide bid is much like the transportation statewide contract. It gives you that umbrella, and then you're able to use, that that's the best pricing that the state was able to get for those umbrella services that we know have to be provided because there are a lot of regulations on the food service function in schools. So with that being said, if we waited until March and we decided to look into that umbrella contract for the state, we could certainly do that. If we choose to do something on our own, which we can also choose to do, we would need to do that. We would need to get our own RFP together by mid to late January to get posted, because it takes a good 4 to 5 months to get the vendors in, to have them go through your process, to work through your customization and everything that you want. With that being said, we are still required by RIDE to use the RIDE-approved RFP. So if we had customization that we wanted to add to that RFP, it would be an addendum, but we have to use the basic template of the RFP because RIDE believes that these are the minimum requirements and the basic requirements that cover the school. So one of the other benefits to using or considering the use of the statewide vendor is that the state is heavily involved, in which they do have monthly and quarterly meetings with the vendor. That's not to say that we can't as well, but they do give you that other piece of oversight for the state as a whole. Some of the other questions I'm sure that you would have as well, maybe we can get a better deal if we go out on our own. There's nothing that says we couldn't. But sometimes the better deals than the state are in those urban districts that have a higher free and reduced lunch population. So I just wanted everybody to keep that in mind as well. We're a little bit different here in South County. We're different than the Providences. We're different than the East Providences, where they have a higher portion of free and reduced lunch than we do. So perhaps they could get a better deal, if you will, than what the state might be able to get for everyone. So my communication is just that should you choose to move forward with this now or not, if you don't now, we really do need to decide if this is something you want to start in September of 2013. We really need to get out to bid with this in January.
Mr. Busgarden.
Thank you, Ms. Page. Ms. King, do you know either a number or percentage of school districts that partake in the state program?
I don't. No, I don't know how many districts are in the state program. I just know that there aren't any other districts that have their food service in-house. That I know, but I don't know how many. I can certainly find that out, how many, I believe it's quite a few.
And I was just wondering if you could, if you were going to do that, excuse me, if then there's a way to, I don't know, put an asterisk or create a chart that shows, like school districts, North Kingstown's that are similar to NK versus, as you mentioned, the Providences and, that have the higher percentage of free and reduced, just so we can see a correlation from similar school districts and what they're doing, and then maybe we can even, pick their brain to see, if they could do it again, would they do it differently, and just trying to get a best practice from those districts that are similar to ours. Not that you would have to do that part, but if you could just give us the, kind of a breakout. I know it's probably not apples to apples, but I'm sure there's some that are close.
I can certainly get you some of that information.
Thank you.
All right, I see Mr. Cerisi's hand and then Mr. Welch.
I just wanted to say that I have a lot of confidence in our administration and especially Mrs. King and Steve Janelle. I don't have a lot of confidence in state-run programs and their ability to put things together, and one of them is the statewide busing is a perfect indication in my mind of a catastrophe. My recommendation would be to see what they have to offer, but by all means, trust in your local oversight, and when you're moving forward, I think we can do a better job than the state will do for us, quite frankly.
Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick comments. As Mrs. King had mentioned, we are the only school district in the state that currently has our own in-house program. Every other district in the state has private contractors servicing their food service program. And I'd like to believe that we're the only ones doing it right and everybody else is doing it wrong, but I'm not so sure that that's the case. And we've been talking about food services and the deficit that we've run in our food service budget since both Kim and I have been on this committee for 6+ years, and I'm sure the conversation was going on even prior to that. And, despite the best attempts of the administration and food service workers themselves and the school committee to balance that food services budget, that enterprise fund in the budget, it hasn't happened, and we continually run a deficit in that line item in the budget, and we continually have to transfer money from other areas in the budget to offset that deficit. And there are a number of factors that that contribute to that deficit. It's, there's some federal funding and some federal resources that we used to receive in food services, products and supplies and whatnot that we no longer receive. But it's been an area that we've been hesitant to delve further into, and it's not just, just so people understand, it's not just food services or cafeteria services. There's a lot that goes on. There's a VOTEC program that's provided to some of our students in the district where they work in the cafeteria, preparing, cleaning, serving food. They work along with our food service workers and supervisors, and they've implemented some great strategies and great programs for VOTEC purposes and for students in special education programs and receiving special education services. So I know a lot of people on the outside may not realize that there's a little bit more to it than just serving food or preparing food in the cafeteria. There's also a programming and educational component to it as well. And I would hope or ask that if we, down the road, are to continue to look to have a private vendor provide these services, that we somehow look for a way to continue to implement and provide those services to VOTEC students or special education students in the district, so we're not disrupting programs and services that we currently have in place for those students. But, as I said, it's a continual deficit in the budget, and despite best efforts by everyone involved to pull that into place and balance that, it hasn't happened. And, I think going based on the advice of Mrs. King and legal counsel that we received earlier this evening, maybe this is an agenda item that we get back to after the holiday break and sometime in January, but it certainly needs to be discussed and investigated further. And it's a very real possibility. And also of note, we have ongoing contract negotiations with the bargaining unit that represents this group, and I believe we have a meeting coming up on December 6th for contract negotiations with the union, the bargaining unit that represents this group. So, I'm hoping we can have some serious discussions and make some headways in those negotiations, and hopefully we can address this issue and end up with a positive result. So I'll end at that note. Thank you.
Mrs. Avanzato?
I didn't know if you could see me down here.
I can.
Kim? I would, in light of some of the comments, and I have a few comments of my own to make, but I would offer a motion to table this agenda item at this time. We can have further discussion, but in light of Mr. Cerisi's comment that we are heading into negotiations on the 6th, I would offer that motion.
I'll second that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second for discussion. Yes, Mrs. Avanzato, and then Mr. Busgarden.
Just continue, and I don't need to repeat, but I'm just concurring with the comments previously made that we've been concerned about the deficit now in this area for quite a while. Food Service really stepped up and did their best trying to address that and worked very hard to do so, but we are still facing that. And obviously, the difficult times that we're in, we need to look in those areas. And there was another point I was going to make, and of course I can't even think of it.
I can come back to you, Mrs.
Yeah,
Avanzato.
come back to me, John.
Mr. Busgarden.
I just want to echo Mr. Cerisi and add a few things to that, if I could. When I first was appointed here in January, I think it was the first part of the school that I was able to see through I was invited by, I believe, Mr. Mark Williams. Is he part of the?
Yes, he's a teacher here.
Yes, and he invited me into his classroom, and part of that was taking me into the cafeteria, and one of his students showed me around. And the pride that those kids had in their job was very pleasing to see. And I would hope that we could work out, they could be included in the RFP, that there was some sort of work study, internship. I don't know what the terminology would be for that, but if it could be included so those children don't lose that aspect of their school day, I think it would be very important. But going forward, I think, I can't remember when we talked about it, and maybe it wasn't as a group, or maybe it was just when I was talking to you, Dr. Ajay, but wasn't it brought up that school lunches, the price for school lunches have gone up? We've raised the price, and the result of that was less kids were buying lunch. Is that right? So we kind of have reached the point of diminishing return when it comes to increasing the cost of lunches. And so all the good work that Mrs. King's been able to do with finding money to make this, and those are her words, we found money, we can find money to balance this cafeteria budget. Sooner or later, there's not going to be money to find. And it's been a black hole for as long as I can remember, probably ever since I've been here in North Kingstown. I think it's time that we fix it. We stop putting Band-Aids on it, stop duct taping duct taping it, stop sticking bubble gum on it, and make this thing work, and make it whole. My only suggestion is I would like to move on it sooner, but if the table feels, if the council feels it should be tabled, then so be it, but that's where I'm at.
If you do table it, I'll be able to take some time to gather some of this other information that you had requested to Mr. Biscardin, so that might help you make some further decisions as well. We do have some time if we want to get started in September, so clearly that's your decision, so we're not completely under the gun, but I can take some time and try to get some more information.
Okay.
But we could easily put this on the December 11th agenda. We don't have to wait until January.
No, absolutely not. And then that way, that still gives me about 3 weeks to try to get some of the information together.
Okay.
Mrs. Avanzato and Mr. Welch. And by the way, by moving me down here, I am more in the center, so I will say that I do see, a couple of you said, oh, you haven't seen my hand. I'm thinking, oh, yes, actually, it's easier for me. So by moving Julia and the student reps over there, I am more right here, so.
I think they like it as well. Actually, John and Larry both made the comments that I was going to make in terms of preserving the programs. That's critical. But I also want to agree with what Mr. Welch said earlier about the state program. I want us to just keep a careful eye. I mean, we'll keep our options open and look at all the different possibilities, our own RFP process or going with the state. But we ran into some major issues trying to look at their program for transportation, so I'm a little leery of jumping on board with them, unless we do the analysis and it comes back that that's the better way. And I'd certainly be open to that at that point in time. But
Mr. Welch.
Yeah, I just want, since I'm not going to be around to help work on this, one of the things that we did when we talked about doing the outsourcing to GCA was that our current staff would be offered positions, and I would ask that you remember to try and consider that when and if you go to outsource to a private vendor.
Yeah, we have a motion to table. So here's one thing that I would ask you is, and I know this isn't something we talked about at our earlier session, but would the committee like to make a motion that if we, never mind. Okay, we have a motion on the table. Mr. Cerisi.
I just want to make a comment, and I'm not sure I may or may not speak to your concerns, but I certainly don't want to give the appearance that this is something that we're kicking down the road and going to continue to kick down the road. As Mr. Biscardin mentioned, it's been a black hole or a deficit and line item deficit in our budget for as many years as I can remember. And again, there's, it's not to assign blame to someone. There's certainly the efforts have been made. It's just an area that we definitely is long overdue with us addressing. So, and I don't want to give the appearance that it's not going to be addressed, or we're just going to continue to kick the can down the road and maybe everybody will forget about it, because that's certainly not the case. I think it's something that one way or the other has to be addressed within the next month, and one way or the other we have to come to a resolution or approach for the start of the next school year. So, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Welch.
I didn't really understand that. I guess I missed the motion that this was a motion to table, and I will be voting against it.
All right. Yes,
It's
Mrs.
going on the
Avanzato.
following agenda, correct? The 11th of December?
I would
Because
put
we
it
have
on the 11th.
negotiations on the 6th,
Yes,
correct?
we have negotiations on the 6th, so we would put it on the 11th.
In light of that, I'm going to be supporting it.
Yes, Mr. Busgarden.
Should the motion to table be amended to state that it will be put on the next agenda, or we, I mean, what's the procedure? I mean, should we be that specific, or does it have to be? 'Cause I
You
just
don't have to put that in the motion. It would be the sort of thing of, we would make sure that was on the motion, on the agenda on the 11th. I think that's the understanding here. I don't think that will be an issue. I think that Dr. Auger is fully prepared to put it on for December 11th.
Right.
And I don't want to speak to say, oh, I would put it on for December 11th. Because we have an election in between there. So I don't want to be any presumptuous as to who's going to be putting together the agenda for the 11th. So, all right. So is there any further discussion?
I am embarrassed not to know. I know that we, whether we've gone with the state program or are just using the state vendor with our own RFP, I can certainly find out by the 11th. But we used to have the same issue you did with having it run a deficit consistently no matter what we tried. And we've been really satisfied with Aramark. The kids and the staff really like the food, and sales have gone up, and we are actually slightly in the black.
Great to hear. Okay. That's what we were looking, that's one of the things John was asking.
But again, I don't know whether we used the state RFP or whether we did our own. We did have some special conditions because we're so small, but I can certainly find that out.
Good to know.
Yeah, that would be helpful. And then just go ahead and let the rest of the entire committee know. That would be great.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion on the floor and a second. Lorraine, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Larry Cerisi.
Yes.
Kimberly Page.
Yes.
Richard Welsh.
No.
Linda Avanzado.
Yes.
John Biscardin.
Provided it's on this December 11th agenda, yes.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you.
You're qualifying those motions. All right. That pretty much brings us to the end of our agenda, but we do have citizens' comments.
No one signed up.
No one has signed up for citizens' comments. Is there anyone who would like to come forward to speak to the committee for the citizens' comments?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All right, we have a motion to adjourn in a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, folks. One of our few meetings where we have ended before 9 o'clock. Appreciate it. Oh, I will remind the committee that this doesn't have to be on tape, but that